My job now is to shift between Ron's keynote address and the panel discussion that we'll have, and to hopefully do that quickly by presenting to you information that is in the Condition of Education in the Commonwealth reports, the data report and action guide, which you have in your packets, but not going into them in depth, rather trying to pull out a few salient points or ideas to inform upcoming discussion. What I really want to do is build a bridge. The Rennie Center for Education Research and Policy has always specialized in this, endeavoring to look beyond current debates to examine broader patterns in the state's public schools and recommended areas for action that are well supported by research and data. The Condition of Education in the Commonwealth Initiative is a pivotal piece of this work because it allows us to explicitly put conversation, discussion, and frankly disagreement front and center in reconciling with different ideas about how we want to move forward a vision for reform. It aligns with our theory of action, of doing independent research that leads to constructive discourse, outreach and engagement following those discussions that ultimately promotes new policies and new designs. More succinctly, how do we take the big ideas that Ron expressed, notions of agency, thoughts about how teaching should be changed to grapple with both academic success and happiness, and put them into practices and policies that are concrete and can be implemented by state and local leaders? And that's some of the thinking we want to do today. In 2013, we presented our first Condition of Education data report, tracking 25 state-level indicators from school performance, of indicators of school performance, from the preschool years through transitions into college and the workforce. Last year, we revisited these same data points, presenting them along with the first Condition of Education action guide, which asked, what do the data suggest about actions that these leaders can take? A concrete example here is early college designs. In last year's report, we were concerned by the high percentage of students who are placed in developmental or remedial classes at the post-secondary level in public colleges and universities. Our action guide grappled with the notion of early college, allowing high school students to be duly enrolled in credit-bearing courses where they could earn credit for college, increase their likelihood of earning a credential or degree, and ultimately pare down or reduce costs for families in pursuit of that degree. This idea led us to conduct independent research on early college designs with a number of models in the state, notably Mount Wachusett Community College, which has a strong program that demonstrates how you can duly enroll high school students that actually lead to degrees at the post-secondary level while still in high school. Now the Rennie Center, in partnership with BU School of Education and Mass Inc., is working with a number of gateway cities to develop, refine, and evaluate early college programs to say, can this be brought to scale in other settings? We do this by reflecting, when we say we're a national leader in education in the state, sometimes a pitfall of being really good at one thing is you don't challenge yourself to innovate in other areas. I had an interview the other day for a potential new hire at the Rennie Center. By coincidence, the person happened to be from Broward County. I have not fact-checked this, so for anyone who's on Twitter, if you go into the evidence, I may be wrong, but I'm willing to throw it out there. Broward County, Florida. The person in the interview noted that he felt that everyone in the county had access to duly enrolled opportunities at community colleges for high schools in that county. That Florida had prioritized dual college enrollment as an effective strategy for helping students get to completion. It's notable that despite our success in Massachusetts, supporting innovative reforms like early college continues to be a struggle for us in this state. These are the type of challenges we want the data that we're looking at through the Condition of Education report to take on. This is why we track 25 indicators each year to note where progress is being made. And again, in this year, we once again turn to the data. People have been asking me in anticipation of the report, what has changed? And there are important gains that have been made. If you look at the data report in your packet, you'll see a small green squiggly line in each section. The green line is intended to represent a line graph or chart of progress that's being made. It picks out one indicator in each section where we can identify progress. For instance, in readiness and early learning, we have seen a dramatic increase in efforts to appropriately assess students for readiness at school entry. In the next category, at the middle school level, we're seeing gains being realized in 8th grade math performance. There's clearly still much work to be done, but scores are improving. At the high school level, there are greater percentages of students who are completing Mass Core coursework, the state's recommended course load to ensure college and career readiness. And at the post-secondary level, we are seeing reductions in the percent of students in developmental or remedial courses. Here's the point where, as a researcher, I say there's no causal evidence between our focus on early college and the fact that remediation rates are slightly declining. It probably has nothing to do with one another, but there's some nice synergy there. But if you look at the data, too often folks say, but there's too much that hasn't changed. If you look at the graph to my left around issues of 3rd grade English language arts performance on the MCAS, not much has changed. Only 60% of students statewide are meeting proficiency or higher. Only 38% of students classified as high needs are meeting proficiency. This is an enormous gap, and it's one where progress hasn't been made over the last year. At least not significant enough progress where we would classify it as success. So the question becomes, if we still face a challenge such as this, where do we go next? Because we're doing a pretty good job with standards, and we're doing a pretty good job with academic learning. And I think the question becomes, is expanding our notion of what's essential to the development and growth of students. As Ron so effectively said, focusing on a broader picture of what students need to be successful in schools and beyond. And reminding ourselves that all of these data points, the reason why we show the entire pipeline, are linked. If you struggle early on in English language arts, you're likely to struggle later on in completing the Mass Core coursework and being state-defined as college and career ready. And we see here only 72% of all students are completing Mass Core, and only 61% of high need students are completing the necessary coursework. So with this year's action guide, we've attempted to identify specific strategies that currently exist in communities, in places like New Bedford, Newton, Chelsea, Boston, areas of the North Shore and beyond, where people are actively addressing a broader vision of education to support students in social and emotional domains. To identify these programs, we were insistent that all activities must have an established track record in Massachusetts. There must be meaningful linkages between indicators and policy solutions. Activities must have a realistic possibility for expansion in the near future. And they must be committed to the notions that education encompasses more than academic learning, and schools should not and cannot work in isolation. A quick word on the academics, because I want to be clear. At the Rennie Center, we absolutely think a focus on academics is necessary to student success. The work that has been done in that area over the last 20 years has allowed Massachusetts to emerge as not just the national leader in public education, but a state that is globally competitive with other industrial countries. We are in no way suggesting backing away from that focus. What we're suggesting is expanding it to be more encompassing of student needs so it tackles the problems and issues that Ron raised. And if done effectively, when I say expand, I mean our focus. I don't mean the burden placed on schools and communities. Done well, social and emotional learning is integrated into academic learning. It can be a more efficient and effective classroom that actually helps schools achieve multiple goals more quickly. You can envision an early elementary classroom where students are working in small groups, like what I've observed at the McKinley School in Revere, which is a high-performing urban school, where a teacher is able to take a small group of 5 students and provide more intimate, direct instruction. Other groups of students are doing peer learning together, working on math or English language arts activities in groups where they figure out solutions on their own, ideally of differentiated learning abilities, so they're helping one another. And a third group that's doing individualized learning using technology. In all of these cases, through peer exercises, through individual exercises, the students are demonstrating social and emotional competencies. They're understanding items like self-awareness and self-regulation that build up notions of agency and ultimately make them more effective and accomplished in the academic criteria that the class is working them through. It all fits together. The challenge is figuring out how to make it explicit so policies and practices can be prescribed for practitioners that they can use to effectively service their students. With that in mind, I want to highlight one initiative that's featured in the action guide. We don't have time for all 5, but I certainly encourage you to read the report. There are 5 different program ideas that are included in the action guide that range from effective strategies at the early childhood level all the way into post-secondary. But the one I want to look at is Boston After School and Beyond Summer Learning Project, which has taken a comprehensive approach in prioritizing, embedding, and measuring social and emotional learning as a critical piece of student learning. Their program content and program delivery provides a promising example for implementing social and emotional learning, or SEL, and fostering those skills. This is an important innovation, as the assessment, excuse me, I have lost my mouse, technical difficulties. Thank you. Jen, I'm going to ask you to come up and just give me a hand with the mouse here. And in my defense, while we take care of the technical difficulties, you'll see that while I'm promoting social emotional learning, what I actually need help with is STEM. So that's the part that I missed in. So I just want to be able to scroll down right there. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we should just. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to do it this way, and I'll put the screen back up. The screen won't change. Okay. Well, we'll worry about fixing the PowerPoint later. Part of the reason why I wanted to make sure, and I'm going to forge ahead, is Chris Smith, my apologies to you in the back, I just wanted to make sure that I defined the program correctly, and I had notes to do that. But let me back up and say the reason why we want to acknowledge Boston After School and Beyond Summer Learning Program is that we see it as an important innovation. As an assessment of social emotional skills is a very new area and remains an obstacle to implementation for many otherwise promising models. Boston is one of only a few districts that has taken steps to figure out not just how to provide the social and emotional learning programming that I was talking about, the examples that come from places like the McKinley School in Revere, but ultimately how to actually assess students' learning in these areas. That working with providers to collect both traditional information and also using surveys and other data collection techniques particular to social and emotional criteria, so understanding student growth in those areas and whether or not the summer learning programs are actually achieving what they set out to do. Too often, what happens in research and public policy making is we have a good idea that has logic and makes sense. We say, well, of course there's summer learning loss. Students don't go to school during that time. And in high-need areas, it's very unlikely that enrichment activities are happening. So let's give them a summer experience. And then we walk away and we don't ask what happens next. And what's been remarkable about the summer learning program that Boston Public Schools and Boston After School and Beyond is leading is there has been an effort to say, okay, we've provided summer learning activities. Not only do we want to evaluate whether or not it's working, but we want to evaluate how. And we want to evaluate the specific set of competencies that can be built up for students in social and emotional domains during a time in the academic calendar where enrichment is more possible and there is less pressure to focus on specific academic learning, which often pushes out other points of focus. That's why we're highlighting it today and why we think it provides powerful lessons that we can draw from in pushing forward social emotional learning, not just for summer programming, but through the assessments that they're using for all types of activities in school and outside of school during summer and during the entire school year. And what we've found from research, not the Rennie Center's research, but research that Boston After School and Beyond has hired other independent evaluators to do, is that through participation in their programming, we are actually seeing academic gains for those students during the school year. So I want to use that as a specific example of how we build bridges between the very important but conceptual ideas we often hear about social and emotional learning and how we build programs and practices that can be implemented at the state and local level to actually provide structure that allows students to be successful in actually achieving the bigger ideas that we've put in front of them.